During the height of Marxism in Eastern Europe, the Polish poet Czesław Miłosz explained how so many very intelligent people could have been seduced by the soulless philosophy of communism. Miłosz said that it was like taking this Murty Bing pill. Now, the idea of the Murty Bing pill first appeared in a 1927 futuristic novel written by one of Miłosz's contemporaries. The novel was entitled Instability, and it's about a foreign army that's threatening to invade and conquer Poland. And the Polish people are nervous and exhausted. They have no idea where to turn for help. Should they fight? Should they surrender? Not to worry. The leader of the foreign army offers everyone in Poland a wonderful gift, the Murty Bing pill. Whoever took this pill became instantly serene and happy. The worries of life, including the worry about being conquered and enslaved, no longer bothered them. Takers of the Murty Bing pill ceased to care about troublesome problems or questions like the meaning of life or what happens after death. So everyone took the pill. But eventually, those who took that pill couldn't completely erase their past or escape their problems. They became schizophrenic. Intelligent people, because they were dumbfounded with life's problems, chose to fall asleep. This first Sunday of Advent, our gospel calls us to stay awake, to be watchful, to be alert. Now, many of us may be dumbfounded, nervous, and exhausted by what's happening in our nation these days. But opting out, becoming indifferent, and choosing to fall asleep is not what our God is calling us to do. We are called to be the clay in the potter's hands, staying awake and in our own way trying to make our world better. Because Advent calls each of us to be a people of hope. And an anonymous quote sums this up. It says, "A different world cannot be built by indifferent people." And having said that, I find it so interesting that our latest election in Syracuse, only 35% of eligible voters bothered to vote. This time in our history is not a time for any of us to take the Murty Bing pill. A different world cannot be built by indifferent people. Pope Francis recently spoke about this. He said, "We are accustomed to a culture of indifference, and we must strive and ask for the grace to create a culture of encounter, of fruitful encounter, of an encounter that restores to each person his or her own dignity as a child of God." It is easy to become indifferent. Every day we wake up to 6 or 7 times of breaking news, hurricanes and fires, the sexual abuse scandals, the sexual harassment scandals, and we watch all this on TV, we read it in the newspapers, and we say, "Oh my God, what a shame how those people are suffering," and then we go on with our everyday lives. Indifference can be a medicine that can protect us from involvement, and we think it'll keep us safe. But it doesn't. It causes schizophrenia. Francis calls us to dialogue. Francis calls us to build bridges rather than walls. Francis invites us to the challenge of finding and sharing the mystique of living together, mingling and encountering each other, embracing and supporting each other, stepping into this flood tide, which is chaotic, it's sure, but can become a genuine experience of community for all of us. So this evening, this first Sunday of Advent, how do we become a culture of encounter rather than a culture of indifference? I highly recommend a recent column by New York Times writer David Brooks. He entitled it, "Our Elite Still Don't Get It." And he writes about the founding of our nation, that when we were founded, we were a nation with strong covenantal attachments to family, to community, to creed, to faith. And it was on top of this that democracy and capitalism was built. But today, what's happened is that it seems like it's all about freedom of choice. But freedom without covenant becomes selfishness. And freedom without connection becomes alienation, which results in frayed communities, broken families, polarization, and permanent political war. So if our goal is only personal freedom, then we find ourselves in a social and a moral void. If we want to become a culture of encounter rather than a culture of indifference, we have to start at the communal level, the emotional level, and the moral level. So our challenge must be to revive family life, to restore community bonds, to encourage shared moral values. And that's why our Bishop Cunningham has written a pastoral letter to each of us on the family, and is calling this year, from the first Sunday of Advent to next Feast of Christ the King, the Year of the Family. And you can find a copy of his pastoral letter on the website of the diocese, or there are some copies in the back on the table to my right. Another challenging article that speaks to this very issue was written by Yuval Levin, who's editor of National Affairs. He entitled his "Taking the Long Way." He challenges all of us to revive what he calls soul-forming institutions. And these soul-forming institutions, which refine our souls, are family and work, education, and faith. It's through these institutions that we learn responsibility and how to become persons who really care about each other. One challenging quote in his article, he says, "Our society today ignores the deeper truth that the family, more than any other human institution, forms us morally. To live as a father and husband, wife and mother, child and sibling, is to live lives shaped by duties and obligations that sometimes grade, but often bring great joy." These days, many of us do feel dumbfounded, nervous, exhausted by what's happening in the world and in our nation. It's so easy to be seduced by the indifference of not caring. Advent calls each one of us to care, to stay awake, to be alert. So the challenge then is to do what we can do to make our world better. Few of any of us probably can heal any of the major global issues by ourselves. But that doesn't mean we can go to sleep. There's much that we can do, and it starts with our own family life and your marriages, your relationships. We might just begin by reflecting on the damage that our time online does to family life, to marriage, to relationships. David Brooks wrote another article about the evil of technology, and he said, Online is a place for human contact, but not intimacy. Online is a place for information, but not reflection. Online is a place for exploration, but it discourages cohesion. So this Advent, let us not fall asleep. Let us do what we can do to work on our own relationships, especially marriage and family life. Let's get off the internet. Truly look at our loved ones when we see them. Truly listen to our loved ones when we hear them. This is the beginning of creating a culture of encounter and moving away from a culture of indifference. The Murdy Bing pill is a failure. Creates schizophrenia. So as we begin our Advent season, let us pray for the grace to stay awake and alert, to be the clay in the hands of the potter, the Creator. And also during this Advent season, let us be a people of hope, not just a people dumbfounded, nervous, and exhausted.